We are honored to welcome Kentucky Secretary of State Michael Adams to Georgetown College. Secretary Adams will be joining a panel of GC professors for an important conversation surrounding one of the most pressing issues in American politics, gerrymandering. As part of the event, the GC radio station and the Georgetonian are excited to have the opportunity to further continue the conversation of gerrymandering with Secretary Adams. Mr. Secretary, we are incredibly honored to have you here, and I'll allow Katie to go ahead and get started with the questions.
Okay.
So today we're going to start with some intro questions. So what do you think is the importance of coming here to educate people about gerrymandering?
So any chance I can get to go to a college campus, I take it. I hit the campuses both as a candidate when I'm on the ballot and also in my official capacity when I possibly can. I love going to college campuses because I'm a lifelong learner. I read voraciously, and I love having good, intelligent conversations. And I try to have those when I'm out in the state when I can. But every time I go to a college campus, I enjoy myself because I'm able to have a smart conversation, a thoughtful conversation about things that I think are important. And everyone is very civil. That doesn't always happen if you're in politics and you get civility. But I always get that experience. I've not been to Georgetown College since I was in college. And I was here for a College Republicans event when I was 19 or 20 years old. So it's great to be back. That was in the early or mid 90s. So it was a long time ago.
Wow. Has much changed since then?
I don't know. I've not been on the campus yet. I'm speaking after this somewhere, and maybe I'll get to see some of the campus. But I was here for a College Republicans annual conference statewide, CRs, and I was chair of the U of L College Republicans in the mid 90s. And so it's the last time I was here.
Long time. So given the national conversation surrounding gerrymandering in states like Texas and California at the moment, how do you feel about mid-decade gerrymandering?
Well, just from what I've sensed, I don't pick up on a lot of interest either by constituents or by our legislators in doing it. I think if our legislature wanted to draw a map with no Democrats in it, they would have done that already. We'll see what they choose to do, but I'm not getting any buzz in the state capitol about that. The legislature considered it, I guess, at least in theory, they could have, and they passed a map that they thought really was fair to Louisville and its political preferences, but also fair to the rest of the state and its political preferences. And interestingly, the map that was passed for our congressional lines, Democrats voted for it. And in fact, some of them even voted to override the governor's veto. The governor vetoed the map. Morgan McGarvey was one who voted to override the governor. The state Senate map passed, and the governor didn't sign it either, even though I think every Democrat voted for it. So sometimes there's a difference of opinion between the governor and his interests and the legislators and their interests. I think Kentuckians are pretty happy with the maps that were designed in 2022. They're road tested. We've had elections under them twice now, and we've had these maps go all the way to the state Supreme Court and be upheld.
I think that's great. I would like to take the conversation a little deeper than maybe what we'll address in the panel. But I am wondering, how would you respond to people who feel like the system is rigged, regardless of which party would draw the map?
You're talking about Kentucky or the U.S.? Or?
Within the state of Kentucky.
Well, I don't know anyone who thinks it's rigged. I've never heard that before. So the map that was written by the Democratic Party when they controlled the legislature back in 2013, I think it was, that was a map. So I wouldn't say you remember, but you might have read that in 2012, the legislature passed maps. They had to, right? That was the time to do it. And then the Democratic House got a little greedy and they came back and passed another map. And that map took me out of the district where I lived, and I was preparing to run for the legislature. And unfortunately, the speaker got wind of that and took me out of my district. So I couldn't run. I got my revenge. Obviously, I ran statewide. But that map that was really designed to hurt Republicans and give Democrats a massive majority, which they had at the time, that map then led to the election of, I think it was 63 Republicans. My point is, the Democrats drew the map and voters sent 63 out of 100 Republicans. And the reason for that is only at the margins can they really tweak the lines to make much of a difference. The public will is going to express itself no matter what. And that's for a number of reasons. One is certainly voter enthusiasm, but I think the biggest one people don't talk about enough is people are already gerrymandering themselves.
Yeah.
People who are liberal don't want to live in Paducah, where I grew up. They want to live in Louisville or Lexington. People who are conservative don't want to live in Lexington, Louisville. They want to live in Paducah or Columbia or Pikeville. And this is going on nationally. We have people moving from California to Kentucky and New York to Kentucky because they want lower taxes or they have culturally conservative views. And we've, for a long time, had our younger people, more progressive people, moving out of Kentucky to Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. So people sort themselves. And so a lot of gerrymandering happens through that. People move to places that are culturally where they feel comfortable. So what that means is it's really not possible to draw a, quote, fair map, because you're going to have Republicans living with each other and Democrats living with each other.
Yeah. Continuing on with that, how do you think you can distinguish between legitimate efforts to ensure minority representation, which we know is a concern nationwide in different states where gerrymandering is also happening, and then also racial gerrymandering, which would violate constitutional principles?
So right now we have a very interesting case in the U.S. Supreme Court. It was recently argued and will be decided by the 1st of July, I think, Louisiana versus Calais. And what is, I think, the most interesting thing about that case is you've got different parts of the Constitution that don't contradict necessarily, but there are goals that contradict. And one part of the Constitution says that the legislatures decide the time and place and manner of voting, of elections, and they draw the maps. And then you've also got, it's not a blunt statement, but you've got parts of the Constitution, especially the 14th Amendment, that say the government can't discriminate on race.
Yeah.
So what happens when you have the Voting Rights Act that says that the government can't discriminate on race except when it should discriminate on race, right? The Voting Rights Act is really tricky because it tries to narrow that balance. It tries to defer to the states to draw the lines. And if Congress wanted to take all the power away from the states for designing congressional ones, they could do that. They've never done that, but they can. They have the right in Article 1, in Section 4 of the Elections Clause, they have the right, if they wish, anything that's time, place, and manner for federal elections, Congress can take away from the states and do themselves. So Congress could say, we're going to draw all the lines. And if you saw that, what you would see is you wouldn't see mid-decade redistricting. You'd see it every 2 years because different parties would take majorities, right? Different parties would take the presidency. So I'm glad we don't have that. But you have this delicate balance where the goal of non-discrimination on race is in the 14th Amendment, but in Article 1, you've got the fact that the lines can be whatever, and there's no test, there's no principles, there's no guidelines, there's no guardrails, there's no nothing. It's just whatever is decided by a legislature or by Congress. So what's interesting about the Louisiana versus Calais case is, if only one can win, which is it? Is it the 14th Amendment or is it Article 1?
Yeah, that's very interesting. How do you think a leader could rebuild trust within their community when minorities in that community feel like their voices are systematically diluted through redistricting?
Well, I think the best thing that you can do is be open about your process. Just the nature of the line drawing is you've got a census, and then you've got to redraw the lines before the next election, and it's a tight window. The 2020 census was delayed because of COVID, so there was a very, very narrow window between when the legislature got the census data and then had to draw the lines for the 2022 elections. You had just a matter of months. So that said, I've been in office 6 years. I've had 0 people out of 4.5 million people who live here. 0 people have ever communicated to me that they feel discriminated against on a racial basis or really any other basis. I have had people complain about gerrymandering. I have had people say we should have a commission do it, which would take a constitutional amendment. I just don't think that's going to happen. It's really hard to amend our state constitution by design. So I think it's kind of an academic issue, but it's just not one that I get correspondence from constituents about.
And now we're going to transition into the more calling and career side of things. We'd like to further explore your personal journey into public service. So, for a generation that sees nothing but animosity online, how do you convince a college student to consider public service?
Well, the best advice I could give to anybody looking at a career is find what you love and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love is politics, and I had a talent for it. I've spent 30 years in it in various capacities, as a volunteer, as a campaign manager, as a attorney for campaigns, as the chief election official. That's what I'm passionate about, and it's what I understand. And those things go together. The more you like something, care about something, the more you study it, the more you practice it. So find what you're good at and go do that. Maybe it's public service. Maybe it's not public service. Maybe it's anything else. Maybe it's business. Maybe it's being a good citizen, being active in your community, working for nonprofits, working for charity. There's 100 ways to benefit the world that are not running for office. But if that's what you want to do, go do that. But make sure that you intern, make sure that you volunteer, go work on a campaign, find some campaign that you care about. It doesn't have to be president. It can be the school board. It can be the legislature. It can be a county office. In fact, if you volunteer at that lower level, you'll get better experience because you'll get in at a higher level, maybe get to run the campaign.
I really appreciate that. So our next question is, what advice would you give young people when considering entering careers in government or law? I know you hinted a bit at that, but do you have anything additional that you'd like to say?
I'd say the same thing for pre-law students. I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I never had designs on that. But I had a rational mind, and I was encouraged to take the LSATs. I would do good on it, do well on it. So I did, and I got an almost perfect score. And I'm like, well, now I have to go to law school, right? I got in. But I did that because that's what I thought I would be good at. But I also had a passion for politics. So for me, it was combining law and politics, and that's what I've done as an attorney, is to do both, to do election law. But I would say to pre-law students, know the kind of attorney you want to be. The most miserable people in America are people who are litigators at heart, but they're doing transactional work. They're writing contracts, right? Or they're transactional lawyers who are in a courtroom. There are introverted lawyers who do extroverted work, and vice versa. So find out what your personality is, know yourself well, and then aim toward that, and you'll be very happy.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. We would also like to further explore another one of your big areas of focus that we know is voting, and we know that's a big passion of yours. I'm going to let Katie take the first question on that.
Okay. So how can college students or young adults between the ages of 18 to 24 become more informed and engaged voters?
Well, I think it's easier than it's ever been to get information. The harder part, I think what's the hardest it's ever been, is sorting through the information. So when I was growing up, we had a culture of literacy in America. You had a vibrant press. And starting in about 2005, 2006, you begin to see a steady decline in newspaper readership and in circulation. But when I was growing up in the 90s and the aughts, people were readers. And the reading was stuff about your community. It was your hometown. And you had coverage of local candidates, local races. That's really in decline, unfortunately. What's on the rise, of course, is information generally. There's just not a filter. It's easier than ever for a candidate to just get on TikTok or YouTube or X or anywhere else and tell you who they are, what they're running for, what they want to do, etc. So it's way easier to get information. It's harder to sort through the information and know what's real and what's not. But I would say that social media has democratized politics. I don't mean made it more democratic with a capital D. I mean, it's made it more democratic literally. Everyone's an equal. Anyone can talk to anybody. Anyone can get any information. Those lines have really been shrunk. And so if there's information that you want, the first thing that I think people fail to do is to know what information is relevant, which is what's on the ballot this year. My office publishes every election a sample ballot on our website, govote.ky.gov, so you can go see what's on there and go start Googling these people. I'd like to think I'm as aware as anybody in my state about who's on the ballot and who's running for things, but I don't know all these people, and I don't even know all the positions. I voted for the Soil and Water Conservation District recently. I don't even know what that is. I had to go look it up. I'm an attorney, and I had 30 people on my ballot running for judge. I didn't know any of them. I had to go look them up. So I'll tell you what I do personally. I Google them. I go to see if they have a website somewhere. I want to see if they've been in the news for a good or a bad thing. I also run them through the Kentucky Registry of Election Finance and the Federal Election Commission to see who they give money to. Because I get a sense of how someone views the world ideologically if I see the candidates and parties and causes they give money to.
That's actually incredible advice. I would like to ask, with COVID-19, a lot of things changed regarding voting. Do you think that voting practice or law will ever return to pre-COVID formulas, such as, strictly in-person voting, stuff like that?
So I ran for a second term specifically to prevent that from happening. And so far I've been successful. It was very frustrating that after expanding voting rights for Kentuckians, giving them more access to vote, and having very successful elections and being returned to office, carrying 118 counties to 120, which is a record, the first thing that happened in the legislature was an attempt to repeal early voting. I had to burn a lot of political capital to shoot that down, and I had to make some enemies. And it was the right thing to do, but it was really frustrating to put that capital into just fighting on a defensive effort to stop bad stuff versus trying to get more good stuff. Candidly, I don't know after I'm gone. I don't think they'll repeal it while I'm still here. I think there's enough respect for me that they'll leave it alone. I don't know what will happen when I'm gone, and I think it depends largely on the kind of person that succeeds me. If the candidates who are put up for my office in 2027, I'm term limited, I won't run for this again. But if someone runs on a platform of getting rid of it and that person wins, they'll probably get rid of it.
Well, I really appreciate your responses so far. Our last question is, do you think mid-decade gerrymandering will become commonplace?
I don't know. I think this is sort of more of a symptom than a cause. I think this is just one more thing that shows how polarized we are. It used to be that, and I say this as someone who was general counsel for several national committees in Washington, the Republican Governors Association, Republican Attorney General Association, and others. Our view at the time was we run our campaigns and candidates, they run theirs, and then whoever wins, loses, and we move on to the next cycle. Obviously, that's changing. And everything, when the country is so polarized, is just a fight for one more yard on the field, right? And I think that that's the real issue, more than the specific tactics that politicians use. The real issue is how divided our country is. And my hope is that we'll focus more on that and come out of that. I just recently finished a book called The Age of Acrimony. It's not new, it's about 4 years old, but everybody is reading it right now in Washington. I just got back, and it's what everyone's reading and talking about. And this book basically is about the politics of the latter third of the 19th century. And it looks just like today. And if you read things people were saying, and you look at the people who were saying them, they look and sound just like today's politicians. They had long beards. Beards were in back then. Every guy had a beard. Very polarized society, very high turnout in the elections, very narrow political center, very few moderates or independents. Everybody was very red team or blue team, very close elections every single time. They were just fighting it out. And there was no persuasion. It was just turnout. And you had leaders, statesmen like politicians who were around in the Civil War, who were abolitionists, who supported President Lincoln and fought for civil rights after President Lincoln was assassinated, amended the Constitution to establish all that. And they were very celebrated nationally as these great principled statesmen. And then they all get beat because politics changes. And nobody really wants statesmen. They just want political bosses who will reward their side and punish the other side. So this is not new to America. I've got a college-age daughter. She's 19. She's a freshman at University of Louisville. And sometimes I think, and I try to explain to her, like, what you're seeing, like, this is not normal. But actually, maybe it's more normal than I would realize. I grew up in the late 20th century, and there was a big political center. You would have 20-point landslides in a presidential race, not 5 or 6 or 2 or 3 point wins. the president usually was Republican and the Congress usually was Democratic, and that was okay. It was a different time. And so sometimes I try to explain to my daughter that normal is what I grew up with, and that's how it's going to go back someday. But maybe I grew up in an abnormal time. Maybe this is actually more normal than sometimes we realize.
Well, I really appreciate you sitting down with us.
My pleasure.
That's the end of our questions. So
Okay.
I look forward to what you have to say in our panel.
Okay. Thanks so much. Thank
Thank
you.
so much for joining us.
You bet. Thank you.